Build smart, move fast, get the edge at last. This is the catalyst.
And welcome to The Catalyst. How you doing? My name is Stuart Takahara. I'm the Vice President of Membership here at the Long Beach Area Chamber of Commerce. And we have got a great guest today, Joachim Roe. He's a trademark attorney and civil litigator representing major manufacturer companies here in high-stakes litigation. Drawing on his experience defending complex business disputes, he helps entrepreneurs and companies build brands the right way from the start. Joachim offers trademark readiness consultation, including clearance searches and strategic trademark counsel to guide clients in selecting, protecting, and strengthening their product and business names before costly problems arise. And today we're going to be talking about them because that may sound like a lot of words. And as a small business owner here in Long Beach or something, you might say, well, how does that apply to me? Well, we're about to find out. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Catalyst, Joachim Roe from the Roe Law Group. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Glad to be here with you guys.
Absolutely. So let's start with this. Why, as a small business owner, should I even care about trademark names or anything? I mean, I'm just a small business here. I'm just starting up. Why should I care about this right now?
I believe that every business owner, their most important asset is their brand. And so protecting your brand is the very first step, to be honest with you, in launching in any other type of business. There are two types of assets, as you know. We have the physical assets of your business, and you have the intangible assets of your business. One of the things that fall under the category of intangible assets are your intellectual property, and one of those would be trademark. Your brand is very important. That's how you're known. That's how business evolved. So branding and protecting that brand is a very important aspect of every business.
Yeah, so it's important. It's my brand, but people know my brand. Like I'm big here in Long Beach. And I don't want to grow my business beyond Long Beach. This might be something that somebody's saying, right? So why is it still important that I protect my brand? Even though everyone knows me here in Long Beach already, what would you tell them to say, this is why this is important that you consider this, even if you don't want to expand your business, even if you're just a tiny little restaurant here or something? Why is it still so important that you do that, even if you don't have any desires to grow bigger than what you are?
Well, that's a very good question. Branding or protecting your brand is not just about expansion. It's all about the identity. Sometimes people use business names or a brand, a particular brand for their company where it has already been taken by somebody else. And so now that is a dangerous arena to navigate because you don't want to use somebody else's name, especially if they have been already using that for years. And one way to really avoid that from happening is to conduct a trademark search. And a lot of people, a lot of business owners misconceptualize the difference between trademark search and a simple company name search at the state level, specifically the California Secretary of State.
Let me give you an example because, when we were talking about wanting to record this episode, an incident came to mind with a friend of mine's business back in the 90s. So we're going to talk about how to do trademark searches in a little bit here, but this is back in the 90s. So this is before the internet. This is before all this online kind of stuff. And searching trademarks was more difficult back then. And as a small business, you just didn't really need to know that. So a friend of mine was a general manager of a mattress company, and they were calling themselves a mattress firm up in Sacramento. It was fine. It was only one location. There was no other mattress firm. They had the name like you were talking about with the state of California. They had it all, this and that. But now all of a sudden, this big chain called the mattress firm decides they want to expand into Sacramento. So when they start looking at their expansion plans, guess what happens? They get the cease and desist notice. They have to change their name. They have to change their logo. They have to change their brand. They have to change everything because now this big company is coming into Sacramento and they're using someone else's name.
That's right. That's where actually the conflicts begin because the use of trademark is very territorial by nature. Sometimes you can use a name and you will gain common law rights on it, but it does not necessarily mean that your name is protected or can be used in the whole 50 states of the United States. That's why you need to you need to conduct a trademark search before you select a name, because that will tell you whether you are infringing on somebody else's rights. And suppose that person has a registered mark and they would like to expand here in California. Say, suppose that company comes from Texas, right? And they have a registered trademark with the USPTO. That gives them the presumption that they own that brand or that name or that symbol or that logo across the 50 states of the United States. And so when they expand, and then you are actually using the same name as theirs, they have every right to tell you that you don't have any right to use that name because they have a registered mark. Now,
Mhm.
it's not as simple as that, by the way, because it becomes a litigation issue where uh, the court would probably have to determine up to what extent have you been using that name. Because if you don't have a registered mark, technically you only have a common law right, meaning to say your right is only as good as to the jurisdiction that you serve. But if you do have a registered mark with the USPTO, you have the presumption that you can use that name or brand across the 50 states of the United States, especially if you intend or will be or has been using that brand name in that particular jurisdiction or location where that person or that business does not have any registered trademark at all.
Right. So for people who don't know, USPTO stands for what?
The USPTO stands for United States Patent and Trademark Office. That specific office deals with patent and trademark in
Mhm.
a national or federal level.
So what you're saying, and I want to make sure I get this, is if you're a new business just starting up, or even if you're an existing business, there's reasons to protect your name and your brand right from the get-go, because maybe you don't have any desire to expand your business beyond Long Beach, but maybe there's another company that's out there that actually has a trademark in the US with the USPTO that might want to move into Long Beach, and that's where the conflict would come into play.
Exactly. You got it right, Stuart.
Yeah. So I think that's very, very important for businesses to understand, because, yeah, you may not have the intent to go anywhere, but that doesn't mean that someone else out there might not want to come into our territory, into Long Beach here, and try and steal your name, no matter how big you are or how small you are. And they could do that.
Exactly, especially if they have a registered mark, because having a registered mark gives you the presumption that you own that name or brand across the 50 states of the United States.
Mhm.
So if they take you in court, they already have established, the presumptive ownership of that brand or knowledge. You, on the other hand, you need to prove how long have you been using this particular name or brand, or to what extent have you been using this territorially or jurisdictionally? Probably not just Long Beach. You're probably based on Long Beach, but you're probably serving other cities too. So
Mhm.
it can be, it can get very, dicey, proving your rights if you don't have a registered mark. So suggestively, it's very important that you secure your brand and register that with the USPTO.
So how do we check? How do I know if I'm using someone else's trademark on accident?
Well, as you know, Stuart, with the use of the internet, it's so prevalent nowadays. So the first step is begin searching at Google. Try searching your name at Google. See, what will come up. The Instagram or the Facebook, or because a lot of people are doing business online now. And so that the online presence is very prevalent. So you can start with Google, and then the second step is do the California Secretary of State search. If because the California Secretary of State gives you what's in our state, our home state. So um, it kind of gives you, the statewide level, what we have here. And then thirdly, you can actually go to the USPTO website, where you can actually search for your exact name, to see on a national level if there's any similarity. Now, I have to give you a caveat to that, because it can get very technical at some point, because the threshold is not just exact similarity. The threshold is is this confusingly similar? So the way it's being looked at, it's in a holistic point of view, meaning to say we're not just looking at the um exact match here. They're looking at, does it sound the same? Does it feel the same? The overall impression, in other words, are being considered whether they are confusingly similar. Will the consumer confusingly mistake your brand from other brand? So doing the search conducted by every business owner is, of course, suggestive. You can do that via Google and doing the Secretary of State search and then going to the USPTO website. But if you are serious about getting your a brand or name registered at the USPTO on a national level, you need to do like a comprehensive search and have an attorney interpret that and conduct further trademark investigation so that when you try to register your brand and it's being examined by the examining attorneys at the USPTO, you can have much greater chance to argue your case, whether they would find it confusingly similar or descriptive. You can have much better chance to argue your point or your position to distinguish yourself from the brands that they could cite along the way.
Right, because there you talked about, is it confusing or could it be confusing to somebody? But you can have like a name of something very generic and have multiple trademarks under that same name as long as they're completely different industries. Is that correct?
That's right, because they're not just talking about, are they similar in name or they're similar in spelling or are they similar in overall impression. They also look at whether you are actually doing the same type of business. Are you selling
Right.
the same type of goods or are you involved in the same services? Overall, those are the considerations that they would take in order to consider whether your brand is confusingly similar to the other one, especially if it's something that is registered with their database, because that's how they begin their search. They always begin their search with what's with the USPTO website, because those marks that have been registered with them, they have obtained the presumptive rights of owning that particular brand or name. That's why it's very important that when you launch a business, selecting a name is very important. I know a lot of people fall in love with this with a name that describes the service or the product
Yeah,
that they actually offer. But let me give you an example, Stuart. I mean,
please.
if, for example, if you're uh, a classic example, for example, the word Kodak, right? You would
Hmm.
think that, what does Kodak mean, right? Does not necessarily have a dictionary a meaning by itself. But look, I mean, it has thrived over the years building its brand because it's a made up name, to be honest with you. And the whole
Hmm.
essence of trademark is for you to own the word, and for it to be owned, it has to carry a certain peculiar feature, meaning to say, as long as is it carries that I would say peculiarity, that uniqueness to it. Or the word Exxon Mobil, right? The word Exxon Mobil, I mean, we would think, what does it mean in the dictionary, right? So those types of brands, they do successfully in the industry because their branding is unparalleled. I mean, who would have thought that along the years, we would have known Kodak as we know them today, right? So there's nothing wrong about being descriptive with your service or with your product, but it poses challenge, especially if you're
Hmm.
trying to own it. But of course, there are ways
Right.
to get around it. That's why you
Yeah.
hire an attorney in the first place.
I love what you said about like Kodak, and now people just automatically assume or connect the dots to be cameras or film or something along those lines. I said in a previous podcast, I talked about a Kodak moment, and
Yeah,
we were talking about that, and there was people on the panel. They go, "What does that mean?" And obviously they were younger. They didn't understand what a Kodak moment was.
right, right.
But my background's in marketing and branding, and I remember going through those classes. They say once you can get your brand to be what is synonymous with what it is and it's interchangeable. I just wrote down a few of them that I remember from back in the day, like Kleenex
All
is
right.
It's a brand. It's a trademark
Hmm.
brand, meaning tissue or something. I think Xerox, when
Hmm.
people say,
True.
"Oh, Xerox this for me," or "Can you make a copy?" More modern, Google,
True.
"Let me Google."
That is
What you're
true.
really saying is, I'll go to or search for it. Yeah, they've all been very, very successful in taking a generic name and giving it a meaning and an identity. I mean, that's the ultimate in brand recognition, at least from where I look at from marketing perspective and brand perspectives.
That is
So,
true. But as you can see, Stuart, over the years they become generic terms, and
mhm,
that is why, in a way, they lost the uniqueness to them. For example, we have known the word. Let's say, for example, I couldn't say, but I think you named one of them. I think that, for example, the word Xerox, right? We've used it as a verb, and then people started using it as a verb. It becomes a common part of our vocabulary, and so
mhm,
it becomes a generic uh, in its existence. It has lost its uniqueness as compared as to
yeah,
they first used it, right? So, or the word, I think there's a word. I forgot the word. So I'm sorry, but
yeah,
there's a word. For example, not paracetamol. I'm not talking about paracetamol, but anyway, it will come to me. But
yeah. It always comes to you when you don't need it. When you
yeah,
want to think
that's true. That's true.
So I mean, from a branding perspective, we always said that's a win when you could take this brand, this word that meant nothing, and make it a household common name. That market penetration and that ownership of it. That's at least what we looked at it in our courses. But going back to this whole trademark thing, there's so many different ways that you can look at things without, a lot of companies have the same name. But you see, we did a trademark search here of the Catalyst, which is our podcast name. And when I went and I did a preliminary search, I wanted to make sure there were no other podcasts or media, things that were utilizing the name The Catalyst,
Okay.
and there were some. They actually did apply for them and they were approved, but
Oh,
now they're dead. They surrendered them,
oh, okay.
so we were able to kind of continue to move on with all that. But there's other companies called Catalyst that are out there. One of them's a weed manufacturer here, that or distributor, so people think about that. But we both have the same name, but we're doing two different things. So the
True.
opportunity for confusion is pretty low.
That is true, because as we have discussed earlier, the examiner would always look at it as, when I say the examiner, I'm talking about the examining attorneys at the USPTO. They would always look at it, as the overall holistic approach of reviewing things, meaning to say you're not just similar in terms of the appearance, but the overall impression, but also whether you are involved in the same industry. Like, are you selling the same goods or service? For example, the word Dove, right? There's a soap for Dove. Right? There's this soap called Dove, and there's this chocolate called Dove, right? So Dove. So those two, they actually have trademarked their names in their respective industry, but they're not
Mhm.
necessarily infringing on each other because they're involved in two different products. One is
Right.
chocolate, and the other one is a soap bar.
So what makes a good trademarkable name? What when if I'm starting a business and I say I need something unique, I don't want to infringe, I don't want to get infringed on, but I want to do something. What makes a good trademarkable name?
Good. Yeah, that's a that's a very good question. A good name to begin with is something that does not necessarily describe your business or your product. That's a I think that's a very first consideration that one business owner should make. And number two, um, I think as long as it carries the uniqueness, the uniqueness aspect of it, when you create a name for your business, right? But like I said, there are ways to get around it. That's why, you know um having a name that is similar to one is not necessarily the end of the world. There are arguments that you can make. That's why you need to speak with an attorney. For example, if you already have been using that name. For example, I have a client, she's been already using this name for 5 years, and now she has decided to, like, I want to trademark because I want to go national. I have
Mhm.
clients with, in other states. And so I think there's a perfect opportunity for me now to trademark. But when we did a search, fortunately, her name is similar to somebody else's that actually has the same product as hers.
Mhm.
Not actually the same name, but it carries, the most important aspect of the name. And
Right.
so that poses challenge. But, it does not necessarily, the end of the world. That's why you need to speak with an attorney to see what are your chances. Maybe we can still get this trademark, but to answer your question, if you're starting a business and you're already thinking about your trademark or branding, of course, every business wants their business to be unique, right?
Mhm.
That's how you distinguish yourself. Look at Coca-Cola, right? Coca-Cola for centuries, to be honest with you, we have known, or they have been known for that brand. They have never changed it, and so you come up with a brand that you can, that will last forever, that will go for years or even centuries, right? And so how do you do that? You come up with something that is peculiar and unique and refreshing in the eyes and in the minds and the ears of the people.
Gotcha. Okay. Talking about the trademarks. So,
Yes.
assuming I got my trademark, so let's say we go through this process. I got the trademark. Congratulations, I am protected. So now I want to go and get the domain name. I own the name, and then all of a sudden I go in there, and then somebody owns it. Somebody's squatting on it. Do I have any protection to get that name if they just bought it and just are sitting on it? Can I say, "Hey, you're using my patent, or you're using my trademark, you're using my name. I want it back"?
Well, here's the tricky part about that. For example, if you have trademarked your business name, right? For example, ABC, and you're doing business restaurant, right? You're in the restaurant business. You have trademarked the name ABC for restaurant. Now you have a domain name, abc.com, right? And now somebody else is using abc.com as a domain. Now the question is, can you actually stop somebody else from using the abc.com domain?
Well,
Go ahead.
not if someone else owned abc.com for a different business, right?
Well, that's the thing, because when you trademark, it does not necessarily apply to everything that you own across, across the assets that you have. For example,
Well, let me rephrase the question and look at it this way. Suppose we going on the same example, I got a trademark for ABC Mexican restaurant,
Mhm.
right? It's very specific, right?
Okay.
ABC Mexican, that's my trademark. And so I go to abcmexicanrestaurant.com, and it turns out that there's a Mexican restaurant in Florida or something that's using it.
And you're trying to prohibit them from using it
Yes. Is
because you
that is
already
that
because you
yeah,
already have the
can I do that? Because I have the
because
patent. Yeah. Or the
because you
trademark.
because you
Can I
already
do that?
trademark. Well, well, it depends. As you know, in law, it's not a
I
black and white.
I love lawyers because that's lawyers and HR people. That's their favorite answer to any question is, well, it depends. Okay, so what does it depend on?
It depends. Well, first of all, do you belong in the same jurisdiction? Are they in California or are they in Chicago? Right? Because they can enforce. They can have common. Like I said, there's this thing called common law right. Even though they're not registered, they can use that, and they are protected in the jurisdiction where they're using it if they're not registered. Now, the second question is, are they in the same business? Probably not, or maybe not, maybe so, right? If they're selling the same Mexican food, well, that can be confusingly similar, right? And number three, um, did you have a registered mark for the domain? Because remember, you can trademark the name, the logo, but if you have not trademarked the domain, then that's a whole separate, question, because it's something that is also separately trademarkable. So a
So
domain is something that is trademarkable alongside with the business name, your logo, your slogan, or even your color, the color of your brand, meaning say. So to answer that question, it depends. If you have met all of those elements, then you have an enforceable rights against that another entity who's using it
mhm.
as a domain. But if you don't, then it's get a little bit dicey, because you're gonna have to prove to the court how you have used it, and vice versa. They're going to prove how they have been using it, for how long they've been using it, up to, what is the extent of their territorial jurisdiction of use. Are you,
It,
go ahead.
no, no, no. I was just gonna say it sounds like it could be very, very complicated. And sometimes it's just best to just find another way or pick a different name or find something that's less controversial. And that's what makes finding a business hard, or naming something or creating something nowadays.
Well, with regard to the main name, that is something that you can trademark, but one of the requirements would be it has to be used as a source identifier. You cannot, what do I mean by that, right? You cannot just simply use it as, well, abcmexicanrestaurant.com as, as a domain by itself. But you have to use that like a branding, you know, as part of your branding, that you're using that domain not just to help people locate you, on the internet, but you're using it actually as a source identifier, because that's the whole essence of trademark. You're trademarking because you are the source identifier for this particular good or services that you offer.
So we know we can trademark our business name. We know we can trademark now a domain name. What are some other things that we can trademark?
Well, you'll be surprised, Stuart. If you happen to know the chime of NBC, and if I don't want
The
to imitate
sound.
this, the sound, ding,
Yeah.
ding, ding,
Yeah,
something
that's the
like
one.
that. So that is something that you can trademark. Believe it or not, sound is something that you can trademark. And the smell of, are you familiar with Play-Doh clay? When we were younger,
Yeah, the plate. Yeah, it's got that. Yeah, it has a very distinctive smell.
that smell alone is trademarkable. Believe it or not, can you believe it? Well, I myself, I couldn't believe it. You know, and if you have been to one of the Apple stores, that we
Hmm.
have here in Southern California, have distinctive store that filled with glass and very minimalist, right? If you have been to their store, the design of it is trademark. Can you believe it? You know,
I can't. I don't know how you can trademark it's a store with glass windows and a bunch of tables. you know,
well, they're the
it's
only ones. Believe it or not, they're the only ones who can actually design. Have a store designed that way. No one else would be allowed. Anyone who would dare would be met with an infringement suit. And lastly, if you're familiar with you know, uh, Kisses chocolate, the way it's
Hershey's.
shaped, Hershey's,
Hershey's. Yeah, Hershey's
the
Kisses.
shape itself is trademark. No one in the chocolate industry can actually produce the same type of that type of shape. And lastly, there's another thing. I don't know if you're familiar with Tiffany and Company, right? Tiffany and Company, for example. If you buy something from Tiffany and Company, they have this blue packaging, that
Hmm.
blue, that color that is associated with Tiffany and Company, that is something that is trademarked by them. And the Christian Louboutin. I don't know if you've seen it. They have
Hmm.
underneath the shoe, there's this red sole, in the Christian Louboutin shoes, that is
Hmm.
trademarked. So anyone in the shoe industry cannot do the same.
Wow. It's just interesting on how deep dive you can kind of get into something like that. Things that I never even thought of, or things that most people have never thought of, just to kind of protect that brand identity, right?
That's true. And believe it or not, Stuart, trademark is not just something that, and this is very important to know, because trademark, a lot of people, they only view it as uh, a branding thing. But trademark, you're doing trademark to really monetize out of it. I mean, I will give you an example. Taylor Swift is one of the, not just a phenomenal artist, but she's a very savvy business owner, because she almost trademarked everything about her and monetized out of it. That's why she's a billionaire. She's not just a billionaire just because she's an artist writing songs, but because of the trademark that she has that she has done, in order to promote and her branding. So trademark is something that you can monetize too, through trademark licensing, not just to protect your brand, but this is something that you can monetize along the way. That's why trademark is very important in your as one of the assets. In fact, during the COVID season, when everybody else was being bailed out, by the federal government, Ford, on the other hand, they actually used their trademark, that logo of theirs, to secure a
Uh-huh.
loan during those difficult times
Yeah.
for $1 billion. So they used their
Mhm.
trademark to secure a loan from the bank in order to
Uh,
withstand the
they
challenges of um,
so they put up their trademark as collateral for a loan?
as collateral. Yes, exactly. So that's an asset. Your trademark is an asset. So it's just something that you can monetize through trademark licensing. It's something that you can use as a collateral. It's not just a brand protection, but it's something that is a part of your asset.
There's so much more to trademarks than I think a lot of people can wrap their head around. From the sounds to the smells to the designs. When you take the word trademark and you break it down, it's really you're marking your trade, right?
Right,
That's
right. That's a
you know,
nice
when you look
observation.
and so when you look at this and you're saying you think of that and saying I'm marking my trade, whether it's a specific feel or a color or a smell or a sound, all of that is interestingly copyright or trademarkable. That's interesting to think about.
hmm
So
That's why people should start thinking about trademark, not just to protect the brand, but eventually this can be a source of, you one of your greatest assets.
we've been talking with Joachim Roe from the Roe Law Group about trademarks and not just like what you would think about trademarks, so many other really cool trademark nuggets that we've been able to uncover in this episode. Joachim, as we start wrapping up here, I feel like I'm more educated about trademarks than I was beforehand, obviously. But is there anything else that you want to talk about regarding this process? Because I'd love to learn how long does it take and how much does it cost? Because those are things that I think people are going to want to know now that they know how important it is. So can we talk about that a little bit about how long it takes and what it would cost to get a trademark?
Absolutely. There are, of course, do-it-yourself, websites out there who offer much, at a lower cost, that they can trademark your brand. It really varies, based on your needs, to be honest with you. Based on on how they can satisfy your trademark needs based on your needs, in essence, right? So I guess what I'm trying to arrive at, the very because the very first thing that in the process when you do a trademark registration, you need to conduct like a comprehensive search. And a lot of people, they realize that comprehensive search is a very expensive thing because it's basically a search of the whole database, not just by USPTO, but basically the whole of the United States. You know, that's why it's very expensive. And when you get that from a search company, it needs to be interpreted by an attorney because, like I said, it's not just a matter of same in sound, same in it has something to do with the overall impression, in other words. So that one is one thing that you have to consider. You need to do like a trademark comprehensive search for your name and your logo because that's where you begin. You trademark first your name and your logo. And number two, you need to have an attorney to interpret all of those searches because an attorney can screen out which one here is likely to be cited when once we started the whole process of application. Because the whole essence of the first step is you need to build a case. You need to know which are the things that already existing out there that can be cited against your case in order to for you to be prohibited registering your mark. And so the very first stage is like where you build the case. You get to know them, get to know who are these marks that are already existing that may be problematic, that may cause problem to you. And then now you build the case towards them. So once you start the application, it's now you're more, in an advocate side, you're more confident because you've already formulated the arguments that you can use once you have started the search, once the attorney has interpreted and conducted a trademark investigation, and now you're ready for the application. Normally, the USPTO charges their fees per class. Now, what do I mean by class? The USPTO categorizes your business if you're going to register your mark either as service or a product. Either you're offering a service or a product. Now, the USPTO charges 350 per class. So, for example, if you are in the business of selling precious metals, right, or gemstones, right, that's product. If you want to trademark your name, for example, if I'm going to trademark my name, Joachim Roe Jewelers, right, or something unique. So let's say something, the essence of gemstone, right? If you'd like to trademark that name, the essence of gemstone, to the product that you're selling, which is precious stone or diamonds or gold, right? That's just one class. And the USPTO charges 350 for that one. Now, you're not just gonna stop there. You're gonna trademark the essence of your business name, not just in the product, but you're also going to trademark it to the retail shop. How do people buy it, right? It's through retail. So you are also in the retail business, and so that's a different category. That's a different class. And so the USPTO charges 350 per class, like I said. So if you're registering your mark for one service and then one product, then in essence, the USPTO charges 750 for those two registrations. So that's just for, of course, the USPTO fees. And of course, there will be a separate fee for a comprehensive search of the name and the logo and the attorney's fees, of course. Basically, the attorney is conducting the trademark investigation and helping you um, register your mark, by surpassing all of these challenges that the USPTO will cite against you in order for you to be, uh, in order for you not to be registered. So
Right.
that's
So
practically the process.
how long, assuming everything goes okay, like without any major delays, what's the average time, or what should someone expect this process to take? How long?
Well, it would vary, but if to give you like a conservative answer, to be honest with you, Stuart, maybe I would say 6 to 9 months. You
Okay.
know, it could be longer than that. Especially nowadays, there's a backlog at the USPTO. For some reason, during the COVID, during 2020, business owners started registering their mark, exponentially. And for some reason, I don't know, people have realized, I don't know what the effect of the pandemic at that time, but that's where it started. People have started registering their trademark, and that contributed to the huge backlog at the USPTO. And another thing that I would like to also to pinpoint here is that trademark can last indefinitely. Compared to like copyright or patent, patent can only last for 20 or 15 years, and then
Uh-huh.
and copyright is in the life of the artist plus 25 years, right? But trademark is different. It's something that you can renew every 10 years, provided that you uh, 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 file a declaration that with the USPTO that it has been continually used by you, and then you do it every 10 years. So
Uh-huh.
technically, a trademark compared to copyright and patent is something that can last indefinitely as long as you have provided a use and evidence that you've been using it. Uh, uh, that you have been using it. So that's the
Yeah.
advantage of trademark.
Right. Well, we've been talking with Joachim Roe, obviously a very knowledgeable, experienced trademark attorney. Joachim, if somebody wanted to say, I need to do this is important to me, or we're looking at an expansion of our business or something, and they say, I need to do this, and they want to reach out to you, what is the best way for anyone to try and find you?
Yes, of course. I'm on Instagram. My handle name is Rolo Corp. Hashtag, I believe, hashtag Rolo Corp. That's where they can find me. And they can also email me at info at law, uh, rowlaw.com, info at rowlaw.com. Or they can give me a call, 714-202-6139, for the most part. And I would be very happy to help them and secure their trademark. I think that's the most important thing that a lot of business owners should pay attention, because there's a value in the identity of your business. As I was telling you, Stuart, we grew up, you know me personally, I grew up looking at these signs, at the shops and with their colorful and unique name, right? That's how we identify business, and there's value to it. Like I said, trademark is not just about protection. It's something that you can monetize, which later on, you can use just like Ford did. Or when you sell your corporate or your company, that's something that is added to the value, the overall value of your business. So protect your brand. That's the most important thing. Before you spend money on marketing, before you spend money on SEO, before you make sure you own the brand first, because it's very costly. Yet, you ended up knowing in the end that, oh, this brand is not mine or somebody else is using it. Or, it's always suggested that when you launch a business, you do a trademark search first to make sure that the brand is yours and will be yours.
More truer words about startups have never been spoken, and I think that everyone needs to be paying attention to this. Yes, it is a bigger expense or an additional expense, but you don't want it to come back and bite you in the butt later on once you kind of have that successful business up and running and you start working toward growth or expansion, or worse yet, due to no fault of your own, somebody comes into your territory, someone comes into Long Beach that wants to try and take away your identity. That's just not okay. So, Joachim, thank you so much for joining us today on The Catalyst. If you forgot how to contact him, all that information will be in the show notes. You can also find him in our directory at lbchamber.com. As a great chamber member, he's listed in there. Joachim, thank you for joining us today, and hopefully we can get you back on here and learn more stories, and we can even do a bigger, deeper dive into some of these other things that you talked about too. So thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Thank you guys for watching.
And everyone else, we will see you in the next episode of The Catalyst. Bye.
Thank you very much.